Bombs Away, starring Stevie Bomber, a bunny rabbit, some Steve bombs, and a tree house. Written and directed by Mr. Chips.
Disclaimer: no rabbits were harmed in the making of this story. All bunnies were kept well-fed, fully caffeinated, and hopped away happily. Also, no tree houses were exploded. We checked twice. Any resemblance to mischievous critters or accidental booms is purely coincidental.
Stevie Bomber wasn't your average guy. Most people grew up dreaming of being astronauts, rock stars, or firemen. But not Stevie. He grew up with one mission: to become the world's greatest bomber. But Stevie had a unique interpretation of what that meant. You see, Stevie believed that being a bomber meant he could drop bombs named after himself, Steves, from the sky, and his targets? Dinner. Specifically, animals. To him, it was just another way of hunting, with a little explosive flair. One sunny afternoon, Stevie climbed the rickety ladder into his makeshift bomber plane, a glorified treehouse on stilts. He'd fashioned the cockpit out of scrap metal, old bicycle parts, and what appeared to be a shopping cart. But to Stevie, this was a state-of-the-art aircraft, ready to take flight. Strapping on his helmet, which was really a colander with holes, he shouted, "Stevie Bomber, ready for takeoff!" In his mind, the propellers whirled to life, and the plane ascended into the clouds, engines roaring. In reality, Stevie just stood in his treehouse, looking down at the woods beyond his backyard, where he spotted the day's target, a wild rabbit grazing lazily in a clearing. "Target acquired!" he bellowed, adjusting his imaginary flight controls. Reaching into his bag, Stevie pulled out a Steve bomb, a rock he'd wrapped in aluminum foil, complete with a crudely drawn smiley face. He had a whole collection of Steve bombs, each meticulously crafted and named. Today's bomb was Steve Jr., the smallest of the lot, reserved for lighter targets. "Prepare for bombing run!" Stevie called out, tipping his goggles, which were actually swimming goggles, over his eyes. He tossed Steve Jr. over the edge of his treehouse with all the might he could muster. The bomb fell, cutting through the air in slow motion, at least in Stevie's mind. Below, the rabbit twitched its nose, oblivious to the impending explosion. The aluminum-wrapped rock landed with a dull thud several feet away from the rabbit, causing it to hop in mild confusion. Stevie leapt up in triumph, pumping his fists. "Direct hit! Dinner is served!" Of course, Stevie hadn't actually harmed the rabbit. It hopped away into the underbrush, no worse for wear. But in Stevie's world, the animal was cooked to perfection, and he could already taste his feast. Climbing down from his plane, Stevie puffed out his chest as if he'd just completed a major airstrike. He made his way to the imaginary wreckage of his target, arms outstretched like a pilot who'd just won a war. But when he reached the spot, the rabbit was long gone. Still, Stevie wasn't one to give up easily. "Ah, a tricky one," he muttered. It must have escaped into enemy territory. But Stevie's mission was far from over. He knew that the forest was full of potential meals: deer, squirrels, raccoons. His imagination ran wild. He would just have to prepare a bigger bomb next time. Perhaps Big Steve would do the trick, or maybe even Stevester the Destructor. As the day drew to a close, Stevie headed back to his treehouse base, satisfied with his victory, but already planning his next mission. Tomorrow, he'd up the ante. Perhaps he'd try a double drop, 2 Steve bombs at once. That had never been attempted before, not in all of Stevie Bomber history. From his bedroom window, Stevie's mom called out, "Dinner's ready, Stevie!" Stevie turned to look back at the house, a proud smile on his face. He raised an imaginary radio to his lips and said in a gruff voice, "Mission complete. Return to base." As he trudged back home, Stevie knew one thing for sure. Tomorrow, he'd be back in the sky, and the animals had better be ready. After all, Stevie Bomber never missed his dinner. Do you want to play a game? It's called Fuck Off. You go first.